Greetings, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Way of the Showman, where we view the world through the lens of showmanship. I am Captain Frodo, and I will be your host and guide along the way. And we are now entering into autumn, and the autumn here in Norway is, for me, luckily picking up in terms of work. And that means that some of those ideas that I had about what the coming episodes would be like, I mentioned it on a previous podcast that I thought, okay, I'm going to have a whole little magic section where I was going to talk to a bunch of magicians, as I now realize that we already have enough episodes recorded to fill us pretty much all the way up until Christmas, and then sometime just after Christmas, I believe the next season will start, where we will look into the deep origins of the impulse of showmanship and how it has helped shape our bodies, our minds, and made us into human beings. So that means that what I had imagined would be like a magic a magic month or a few magic months has now just been left with Mario, the Make a Magician, an episode which got a lot of new listeners to us, which was very exciting, and I just wanted to release that so that his episode could come out before he opened in Edinburgh, which was an astounding success. So that's very good to see. And I had another interview, a great conversation with Mac King, which I will bring to you. The first episode, or the first part of that conversation, will come out next episode. So stay tuned for that. And if you are a magician, or you know somebody who is a magician, or you are interested in magic, how it works, and what it means to be a legend in comedy magic, which is absolutely what Mac King is, then tell them about this. Spread the word to those out there who are of the prestidigitational persuasion. So with all that said, we are going to dive back in with Erik Åberg today, and we will pick up. He was just about to say, tell us about another example in his very deep exploration of the relationship of time in performance and who owns and controls this time. Now, I've previously described a showman or a performer as in fundamentally what we do is that we are curators of time and attention. We stand facing the other way in front of an audience, and then this process, we get time from them and we give something to them in that time. We've curated the attention that they have. So he has done a beautiful thing where he draws up 3 circles, which he talks about in the end of the last episode, and now he will look further into to this and how these different levels of participation, how involved is the audience in it? Are they just watching it, or are they fully participating and learning about juggling? And so we pick up the thread where we left off last week, jumping straight into the next example. And you can read in the show notes, you can find a link to an interview where we get to know much more about Erik Åberg and where he comes from, and biographical information. Here, along the Way of the Showman, we mainly just jump straight into the ideas, so that's what I would like to do now. Thanks to Erik Åberg for spending 2.5 hours talking with me at Den Fantastiska Platsen, the fantastic place in Stockholm, Sweden. So let's jump into the world of ideas.
If you have the energy for one more example, I can do one.
Yeah, let's do one more example, absolutely.
Yeah. So in terms of that, since I had then described that practice of the juggler that makes sculptures and manipulates those sculptures in the performance, then of course, when you've done that, then the next step becomes becomes to ask yourself, what is the next step?
Yeah.
And how do you expand on that? And that was, for a long time, I struggled with that. Like, well, how can I go deeper into this? How can I do? how can I, find another path to take now in terms of this exploration continuing? And what I then, it's again this uncovering of strategies and uncovering of practices. And I saw, okay, so now suddenly I saw the archive as an artistic practice. I look at the archive, I take things out of the archive, I can put things back into the archive, and that can be seen as an artistic practice. And once I did that, I also realized that what I find in the archive, I can also see as components, which means I can take, if I see those as components, again, I can tie that back to the original practice of the juggler that I then took as a sculptor, which is to take components and repeat them, group them, mirror them, etc. So what happens if I do that as a mode of thinking in terms of the specific archives that I was interested in? And I had, at the time, I had this historical subject, Paul Cinquevalli, who was a music hall performer in the early 1900s. So I already had an archive of 20,000 newspaper clippings of him. That's something that I've accumulated over the past 15 years.
20,000?
20,000. He was super famous. And we don't really know of him today. He's not really a known name, but yeah. I recently actually found an article that said that Paul Cinquevalli is as famous in New York as Mark Twain.
Oh wow! At whenever that is, early 1900.
Yeah, 1906 or whatever.
Which is the same time that Houdini is kicking around, because he did his first straitjacket escape in 1908 or something like that, the big outdoor kind of thing. So he is.
Yeah, Cinquevalli is right just before. They overlap a little bit, but it's right around that time. And of course, that little article, of course, they might be exaggerating or something. Yeah. But it was interesting to find, especially since I had that archive of 20,000 clippings. So then I was just like, okay, what am I interested in now in terms of juggling, and how can I use this archive and the components of the archive? And what I was interested in is, okay, I kind of saw juggling history as that's the past, and then juggling today I can observe it, and then I saw this sculptural stuff that's a suggestion of where the practice could go in the future, right? So you have past, present, and future, and then I thought, okay, these are kind of existential questions. You're getting close to some kind of existential questions, just like you could translate that trinity directly onto human life. It could be something like, where do we come from, how should we live, and what happens when we die, right? So I kind of had those two trinities that I was comparing a little bit, and then I realized, okay, I could ask existential questions about juggling and circus, and I could use the archive to do that. So then I was just like, okay, maybe I should ask that question, why should juggling exist? Yeah. And I found two little writings about Cinquevalli that dealt with that. And the first writing was an article that said, Cinquevalli is incredible, he's like Shakespeare, it's like Ninjinski, it's this incredible thing. And then I found this other article that said, Cinquevalli, what the things that he's doing, we shouldn't be doing. And this author that made this argument, he had, do you know what a bilboquet is?
Like those Japanese toys where you get the thing inside the cup and the ball, kind of?
That's the kendama. It's very similar. Yeah. So the bilboquet is an old French toy. It's basically a kendama without the cups on the side. So it's just a stick that have a spike in one end and a cup in the other. And then there's a string to a wooden ball that has a hole in it. So you can catch the ball in the cup or on the stick. Yeah. So this author, he had one of those bilboquets. And he said that, oh yeah, I have a bilboquet, and I mess around with it in the backyard every once in a while, and I can catch it on the cup sometimes, but it's only one time out of 100 that I manage to catch the ball on the stick. And when I see Cinquevalli, I realize that this is a person who can catch the ball on the stick 100 times of 100. And that is wrong, because it is evidence of a life that's been wasted on
misspent.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have some thoughts about that, but yeah.
Yeah, just to wrap it up. So I had those two kind of end points on some kind of existential question. Like either
one
we say
this
that
is of great artistic value, meaning it is enriching for human beings to witness this performance. The other one saying it is a time waste that might possibly actually be bad for the world. If this catches on, the world will be will be
like
worse
that.
off.
Yeah, something like
We
that.
won't have time to do the good stuff.
So I wanted to think about that question of like, should juggling exist, let's say. You could ask that question in many ways, and that's also like, how do you find the best articulation of that question?
Yeah.
Why juggle, or should juggling exist, etc. Like there's many ways to ask it. And I thought, okay, can I think about that question specifically by taking out things from the archive of circus to kind of set my mind in certain spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to drag out like historical figures. Like there was a man who worked in a museum in New York in 1896 called Captain Vetrio. And Captain Vetrio, the thing you had to do to watch his performance is you had to bring some kind of poison. And Vetrio's performance was that he ate the poison. So you brought arsenic.
He was a poison resistor.
Yeah.
It's on Ricky Jay's Fireproof Women, Learned Pigs and Fireproof Women. That's like the subtitle of that is a history of poison resistors, daredevils, and certain something. So this might be this guy.
Maybe. So I pull out people like that, and there's another one called Liane de Pougy, is a singer at the Folies Bergère in 1896, and she had this idea of demanding from her lover to fill a bathtub with champagne.
So when she's done singing, she has a bath in champagne or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that experience, and of course you can say that's silly, but I thought it was actually really profound, because it's some kind of a conceptual peak of feeling something, because it doesn't get better because you demand more champagne. You know, I demand a whole ocean of champagne. Well, you can't. It's not possible. But a bathtub you can kind of imagine. It's 350 bottles actually, so it's possible. And so there's that. It's wasteful. It's sensual, and it's also sensual in several ways, because you can also, it's sensual as in your senses, right? What is it like to submerge yourself in champagne?
In any kind of fizzy water, I've never thought of what that is, but yeah, that must be a certain process. And being a nude woman in a fizzy bath has that other type of sensuality.
And can you just put your head down and just drink it, or know, like there's all these kind of funny images that start appearing. So then I was just like, okay, well, it's this nexus of qualities actually. This idea about the champagne bath. Mm-hmm. It's wasteful, luxurious, sensual, erotic. You continue
and
the list.
Preposterous that somebody will say, I will not go on stage and do the thing that I do without this requirement being met. And it then that at that time, which was also the time when Barnum might make a huge poster and say, no expense spared. It's like $340,000 spent every time we move this great menagerie, and no, that all for you. Like the opulence of a spectacle was being played up. So in that, if she's at that same kind of time, then she's producing the. She's making these demands at that time, and at that time you would imagine that it's a little bit like a precursor to the blue M&Ms, which has become today's shorthand for unreasonable demands. Or whatever.
It was not it was not a demand to sing. It was a demand that she supposedly made to her lover.
Oh, like that. Okay,
but
still, yeah.
Yeah, no. So then I was really fascinated by this situation. I was really fascinated with it conceptually, that it had all these qualities. And then I was thinking, okay, maybe if I'm trying to construct an argument for juggling, maybe it could be similar in terms of that it's not one thing that this rests upon. Maybe it could be a nexus of several things that meet, and that's what gives this thing value.
And it gives it, I would also then go, it gives it a depth. When you think about it first, it's just like an unreasonable demand. But then on the second one, you go, actually, like there's, when you actually look at that thing, I just read this article by Max Maven, and he quoted Borges saying, everything is mysterious. It's just that in certain things, the mystery is just a lot more evident. So it's like you look at this and you go, and it's a bath of champagne, and you go, that's just a stupid thing. But then when you look at it afterwards, you go like, oh, it's got a rich complexity to it. Like you just picked it apart from sensuality and the senses and just the demand.
Wasteful.
Yeah, and also just like when it's from a lover as well, there's something in asking unreasonable demands from someone. It's almost in the territory of an S&M kind of relationship. Not in that, but you're asking for a completely unreasonable thing, and that to acquiesce for your lover to go, oh, you are so worthy, of course I will pour 350 bottles of champagne in a bath for you, because that, and in that sacrifice you are there's something about that relationship too that says a lot about many things. Yeah, I can see.
Yeah, and it's also it's something about commitment, perhaps, and it's almost abuse. You know, you make an unreasonable demand.
That's why I'm linking it to S&M, because you're making a completely unreasonable demand. It's not like just I want to smack you or whatever, and then that should be okay. But it's that thing of going, I'm making an unreasonable demand, and everybody knows that this is an unreasonable demand, but you make it, and it is also 100% serious as well. And then once this thing has happened, it's now this relationship is like alive. I don't know.
Yeah, I think she became something like a nun.
I'm just going to demand that from someone at some point. Yeah,
I think she became something like a nun after her career.
Because this was what I was thinking, speaking about nuns, that made me think of the argument I can't remember where this comes from, but that what a monk does who vows to live in celibacy and spend the majority of their time alone in their cloistered cell interacting with God via a book is also a type of behavior where you're spending too much time on something which has no value except for yourself. If you don't believe that there's a transcendent God, that it does matter and you're keeping the world alive because you're constantly praying or whatever. And that there then is through the practice of the guy who is doing the flipping of the thing and goes, this is wasteful. But the argument has also then been made that it is as wasteful to be a devout Christian or devout Buddhist who just sits all alone and prays. That is like playing golf. I'm going to stop going, there's no real separation between them. Just golf makes me feel good, so I'm going to play that. But it's also a waste of time to hit the ball into a hole or whatever. So that just popped to mind when you said, oh yeah, it's that guy said that this activity is useless, and in one way it kind of is, but I don't know. I don't think it fully is that simple.
Yeah, and I'm in the midst of this. That's pretty much as far as I've gotten. But you could also separate the question into: are we talking about juggling or are we talking about performing juggling?
Yeah.
Because you could say that the performing of it, that's the useless part, but doing it for yourself, you can.
But I would again. I mean, it can be useless. Because I make a joke of that when I do the spoon and I'm going and I balance the spoon and I catch it behind my ear and I say, that feeling that you have in your heart now, that is the circus feeling as part of what I'm making the point. It's beautiful. It's impressive, maybe a little surprising that somebody spends so much time learning something so useless. and it's a joke, but it's also a genuine kind of question. But the thing which negates it is that they are laughing. So usually by that point, it's building up to being 5 minutes that they go, I laughed so hard, this was so great, I had such a great time, and in that moment my idea of the performer's contract has been fulfilled. They give me some time and some attention, or their attention for some time, and what I do with the time that they give to me makes them better off. I leave them enriched in feelings. Maybe I give them something to think about, because there's a strong philosophical idea in that act as well, and it leaves you with that feeling that we get when we see skill well executed. That's just like, that also leaves you going, oh my, that's amazing. So I find that the dichotomy would make me like, oh, this is so useless, but the usefulness of it is evident to all of them. If they paid me $5 to see just me balancing the spoon afterwards, if that act goes the way that it does when it goes well, which is a lot of the time, it's one of my strong, well-crafted things, then they will go, that was $5 well spent. I'm glad I spent it on that rather than on a beer, because now I can get the beer and I can't get that thing anymore. So that means that there was a value created that people are willing to put down money for, or whatever. So in that way, I gotta go, the most useless things can find their usefulness through them being enjoyed by other people. If you take it into account that we are like an ultra social species, and that we can't exist without each other, and the sharing of experiences together ranks high on the list of what keeps us sane and what makes us happy, or whatever. And that, on the other end of the spectrum, the worst thing you do with someone when they're already in prison is to put them in prison by themselves. That's a punishment when you're already locked up. So there's something about that social thing of going, when we all sit around and go something, then we're willing to pay sometimes extraordinary amounts and give somebody a champagne bath if they can give us the experience or whatever.
Yeah, totally. No, I think I saw it as a little bit of a challenge too, because a lot of times I think juggling is spoken of like, doing useless things the hard way or something like that. And I saw it as a challenge. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with that.
No, because this is also true, but only from a certain point of view. I can laugh at that.
Yeah.
There's more to it than that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought, okay, what happens again about back to perspective shifts? What if we look at juggling from, as something that is valuable, for an example, and that again tying back to the practice that I described in the beginning about the sculptor, and that was also tied to this thing about value, because I realized that the juggling equipment that we use is often like plastic stuff, looks like we got it from the gas station or something.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, what if a juggling object actually looked like something valuable, or had that position in society as something valuable, like a violin or a cello?
Yeah. Wow,
And again, now when I'm doing this existential stuff, I ask that question again, like how would it be like if we perceive juggling as something really valuable, like maybe we do with the opera or ballet or something. I don't know what the best example would be, but what would that be like? And also, can I develop a strategy that creates suspension of the mind for a short time, that it at least feels like that? Even if it's not all the time, but maybe I can do something to just short suspension for the mind that makes, in that little perspective that was presented, juggling felt valuable. So one thing that I've been working with in terms of that specifically is these there's a lot of quotes about Cinquevalli from that archive I told you about, the 20,000 articles or clippings, that there's a lot of them that talk about Cinquevalli as this incredible thing. So I thought, okay, what if I lift all those quotes and I just make a list of those only, nothing else? You just read quote after quote after quote that talks about juggling as this, Shakespearean, fantastic, genius thing that everybody needs to experience. Can I make, by going through that list as a reader, again back to experience, when you're in that experience, maybe you get the sensation that juggling has a lot of value in that moment.
Yes, I think so. And that's a great example of it captured in time, because the problem with juggling is that it is an experience that either you're there when it happens or you're not. So in a sense, the awe felt in the presence of watching the specific ways that Cinquevalli did his incredible feats of skill have left these almost like fossils through these quotes. People who were either with their job, and you can always argue as to how real it was or whatever, but the fact is that somebody then sat down and wrote this, and out of the 20,000 clippings, and then let's say there's just 5,000, but 5,000 times somebody wrote it in the paper, and the absolute astounding majority of the people who saw him did not write something in the paper. They just watched it and loved it, and that was why he was famous and had 5,000 quotes. So it's like a fossilized version of the astonishment that he created in people, and that's certainly, I would say, that's like an evidence that he was of great value, because all those people can't have said it without something having been in there.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's a good, very good thing. And I was thinking, we're trying to talk. I think maybe I talked about this with Jay in the episode where we talk on my podcast where we talked about skills. But I was thinking about why is it that we are impressed with skill? Why does that have value for us? And I don't know if I've said it, so you've heard it, but that. Thinking for most of time, at least up until Gutenberg made the printing press, and the majority of skills or knowledge or wisdom that then people had came through physical skill. Like throughout the Middle Ages, when you were a skilled person or a studied person, like a lot of that was embodied knowledge that you did. There was like Middle Ages is like the very first university might have merged in England at that time. I can't remember exactly when that is, 13 something when the first university comes, but it's like people didn't talk academically at that time. There was just kind of theology that was going on a level which also most of it happened in Latin, so it's not for the normal people. And that during this time, the respect for watching physical skill as a form of knowledge or whatever, that this was a value of the time, and that that has been like that for so long, and like thinking all the way back to when we didn't really even have language or so, but that.
Well, in terms of answering, I think I have at least 4 answers to that question.
Interesting. Yeah.
I'll do them one by one. The first one that comes to my mind actually comes from a conversation that I had with Michael Motion about that.
Oh, yeah.
And Michael, I mean, is this all the time returns as a reference in me and Jay's discussions. But what Michael said when I talked to him about this, he said that he calls it the kill, and that's what's so fascinating to us and why we value it so high as human beings, is because it represents the kill in terms of like a hunt or a fight. That if you and I were starving, right, and we go out in the forest, I mean, millions of years ago, let's say hundreds of thousands of years ago, and we have our spears, and I managed to throw that spear, right, and I hit the deer all the way over there, and like you saw it, and we take the deer back to the village, right, and you now tell the story about me, like, Erik did it, like,
for real.
You should have seen him. Like,
it was too far away. We all thought, what a waste of a good spear.
Exactly, right? But now I got him, and the whole village now eats, right? It was the kill. According to Michael, this was so ingrained in the human species because of this over and over repetition of this myth about the person who could accomplish this stuff, that eventually it's just ingrained in our behavior.
Yeah, that is one valid argument. I reckon, that's a beautiful picture.
Yeah, and the other one, the second one, is from Ivar that we just had our conversation with, and that is that, life is hard, but we want life to be easy. So, on the way to our car that we're going to drive to the work that we don't like, or that's, unpleasant experience, we walk to the car and we have our car keys and we throw the car keys and we catch them behind the back. Yeah. And then we nail that catch, right? And now life was easy. Like the skill represents that kind of opposite of that.
Yeah, and also then same thing, but another side of the same thing is then by transferal you watch the person who does it, and with such great ease do they face whatever obstacles they are doing on the stage. Yeah. And that you through a kind of mirroring, you feel that this is a valuable thing, and you're going, that's so nice. It's just something really well done, a master of a situation, and that's the same, like a different version of the same thing.
Yeah, and this is actually this example is actually one that I'm working with in my existential arguments, because the way I see it is what a performance is, or what that moment is. We live these flawed, hurt-filled lives, right? So what we do as a performance, or as a moment, or as a hobby, is that we carve out one little piece of reality, and we make that little piece perfect, right? And then we try to ignore everything else just for a moment. And you see that in the golf swing or whatever, right? You can find so many examples of this. And like you make that perfect golf swing, and the ball just flies out perfectly. And in that moment, life was perfect. And we will never achieve that. But we can carve out those little moments. And I think, and that works both as from the perspective of your own experience, but it also works as a performance that we as the audience, we see that again, now the performer gives us that as a gift to shut off the brutality of the world, and for a second imagine that life was actually perfect.
I have made that argument pretty much in those words on some clip from 2008 or whatever that's online, where I'm saying it's like, I'm just doing it, and I'm practiced this act for so long, and then you get to see it, and for those 10-12 minutes that I'm on stage, all this stuff, chaos happens, but whatever it is, I turn it into a plus. So in that moment, even though all this kind of chaos is hitting me, I am making a perfect performance or whatever. And it seems like this is just me, but for the remaining 23 hours and 50 minutes of the day, I am as lost as anyone. But just to see that has an element of catharsis for the audience as well. Yeah, that's a great one. So that's number three.
So I have one more, but let's linger on this one for a second, because I think also it doesn't necessarily have to be about skill. You can also just see that as just as a strategy for abstraction in that moment. What you're doing let's say, if we call this as a performance, let's see, some moment of a performance, that we can actually use this as a microscope in that moment, that we all together, we decide that now we are going to focus on this specific detail, and we use that. We use our sensibilities as artists to create that microscope, to create that tension around that little moment, to create that precision, right?
Yep.
And as an artist, we can put anything in that microscope.
Exactly,
it doesn't need to be skill. It can be, whatever that you as an artist would like to put the...
This is that lens where I'm going, like, what we really do with that time and attention that's given to us is that we are curating time and attention. They give us that, and then we can do something, anything within this, with this time and attention, as long as it then is pleasing, edifying, or somewhat
horrifying,
or
if
horrifying.
That's what you want, right? Ugly.
Yep.
Like, it doesn't matter. It's just that it's that tool just sharing a specific aspect of reality with precision.
But it needs to somehow connect with it. It can be positive or negative, or like it can be horror, or it can be whatever, but it's somehow putting its fingers into the person and leaving them somewhat altered in one way or another. Either that it gives you some ideas, or it gives you a desire to actually do something, or it makes you feel a certain way. That it's going to elicit a response. So even if it isn't, I normally think of it as enriching, because you can enrich people also by, like, I used to love extreme horror movies, or like the Texas Chainsaw and everything, and I found that incredibly fascinating when I was a teenager, and that was also then enriching. So it doesn't have to be that it is a positive thing with flowers and dancing bunnies. There could be also something that still has value because it's exploring the dark side of reality as well. So yeah, but it needs to somehow.
Totally, and it can even be something unresolved. You know, like
mystery. That's mystery, and that becomes almost at the top of the pyramid.
Yeah.
It's like, but you need all these simple things of happiness, or even whatever, but to build it up to the point of where you reach the edge of anything, because there is mystery in everything. It's just sometimes it's more easy to spot than others. Like that thing, there's a guy like, and if you can do that through what you do, through using religious language or using whatever it is, all of a sudden we're at the Big Bang, and you have one person in the audience feels the immensity of infinity and has an epiphany or whatever like that. That's like, then you've touched on, like, so much of mystical experience has to do with the immensity of God, the immensity of the universe, or the insignificance of the human being, or whatever. Like, it's this huge thing. So like and mystery is kind of everywhere. If you get the edge of it, if you get to the edge of anything or whatever, you go, there is something there, which is almost tying it back to the Socratic method. If you ask enough questions about something, you will reveal that you don't actually know anything.
Right, and I think also, like, I'll just say one last thing about that number 3, but in terms of what you put in that microscope, I think it also has a lot to do with just us, the human condition, that we exist in time and space, and we know that all these moments and materials and human beings around us, it's just, everything is just ephemeral, right? It's just all gonna evaporate with time, and we can never make it stop, right? It's always slipping through our fingers, no matter if we want it or not. And I think what artists do is that we try to hold on to something, right? We try to make that moment last, or it's some kind of an activity of trying to grab hold to something abstract or concrete, or so there's something even. Yeah, I think there's really something connected just to time and space too, where almost what you put there is secondary. It's the act of putting something there that makes that is the point.
Yeah, it's also it stands almost in a funny relationship. Henri Bergson talks about duration as a fundamental aspect of reality. Like, there is no single moment and there's no single thing. It's actually all in a duration, and we can say that a duration is like this conversation is a duration, but we were talking before that, and I knew you were doing, like, so you go, where do you draw the line? So any kind of cut of saying this is the beginning and this is the end is never actually the truth, because everything expands in every direction or whatever. Oh no, I lost I just got too far into this thing. And so that fact, you can't hold on to anything, everything is constantly in a flux, and we just want to fix a moment. What we're doing with a performance like mine or whatever, where I can go out and you give me these 12 minutes and I will do it, and some sort of perfection that seems to be able to happen time and time again. Like, you're just going, I go out in front of the audience and say, now I'm going to do this, and then they all have that time that I promised them to have. It's a cheating of this moment of duration. You create a semblance of something real that feels more real than reality itself.
In retrospective, it's almost like that was reality for something.
Like we just caught a glimpse of reality right there, and that is like I love that as a concept within when you are performing too. I'm doing something and then something doesn't go right, and then for a moment they go, I was there that day when that happened, and when he said this and I spoke without any pretense. All of a sudden something real happened, and then and then we got back in again, and it felt like a moment which was like it was already real, but then it became hyper real because it talked meta to us in that moment, and like of where, which is this weird thing where you can get closer to reality through art, and art does not need to be and almost can't be the same as reality. So when you're making a theatrical representation of something on stage, or you're writing a poem about something, it's somehow the poem or a novel or whatever expresses the what existence is about better than when, because you read the story or you hear him tell the story of how we went there yesterday, and I'm like, oh, I wish I was there. Oh, but I was. But it was even better when he was telling the story of how it was when we were in the line, and he came out with and I was going like, yeah, I was there, but I was partly talking to Sindri about something or whatever. So it's like the retelling of it or whatever is even more catered to us humans, because you immediately cut away 99% of the extraneous parts of that story of what was going on here and there and blah, blah, blah. And you just get to some sort of essence, and then I enjoy it all the more. And we know from the malleability of human memory, now the way that he told that story, that's now part of my story, because I was there when that happened. And that's like now taking form of that moment and making it into this was a duration from there to there. This was now become a sort of discrete thing or whatever. I don't know. Maybe that is something in there, like you're creating an aspect of reality that is more real than reality, and you feel like it's telling you something about reality.
Yeah, that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
And like I think with the right artistic sensibilities, that's the magic that we have in those moments. It felt more like, in retrospective, like we're never gonna forget that moment, right? We're never gonna forget the moment when he said that thing and I laughed so freaking hard.
Yeah.
We're never gonna forget that moment when I saw the guy juggling with the 7 clubs and it looked like the one club was levitating at the top, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
That tickles our fancy. Yeah.
No, that's really great. I mean, there's so many things, and as like the idea of the throwing of the spear and the kill being like, this is like a great example of what I was trying to articulate with people just had an awe from the peak of technology, which was the blacksmiths that just made a sword or whatever. Like you just took nothing, like dirt, and then now we have this tool here, which is like just made you the ruler of that village because he made that for you.
Yeah.
Whatever. Now you can get what you want or whatever. So there's like, we have this awe of people who can master any kind of skill that's done well, and that might have then transferred onto this. And it's interesting that you already have 4 lined up or whatever, and some of them I've thought of before, but I have not put these into any kind of
You want to hear
systematic.
the 4th one?
I would love to hear the 4th one.
Yeah, so the 4th one is from a French performer called Rémi Larosny. He's a juggler, and he told me this when I was talking about this stuff. He said it's man's revenge on God for the injustice of mortality. So when the wire walker walks over the wire, she's shooting arrows at God, like, I don't care that you're gonna take my life, by age, like I'm ready to die here and now. So it's a challenge to God, basically, in that moment. And like on the high wire, let's say we could say that that's a real challenge, because she could fall down and die, right? but I think it's present symbolically in all circus, because it's for the juggler you could drop the balls, or you could fail the joke, or you could, there's all of these ways that
you call that you die as a comedian.
Yeah, as a symbolically represent that challenge, and the audience celebrates that with you. Mm-hmm. That's what they see too. They also know that they're also this decaying soul, so to speak. Yeah. And that's why we celebrate this challenge where someone succeeds.
Yeah. I mean, that's also like this. It's valid for all art in the sense of, like, you make a painting, and then some of these paintings or some of these examples of literature, we engage with them and they continue to just blow your mind or whatever. And that has this enduring truth that you have to reach for those real events that you have, you reach for religious language to talk about it. And it can happen within philosophical ideas that just blows your mind so that your life changes, or it can happen within experiences that you have of love or of enthusiasm for an artwork, and it can happen in the sense that somebody just created something impossibly beautiful with their hands. And all of those has this tendency for us to feel like it's immortal. The poetry of Ovid will always, you read it, and then there will be this depth in it that just challenges it challenges God in a sense. And that made me think of this thing that Eva sent me with this little poem, and I can't quite remember it now, but it's like God created people or whatever, and then language, they found a language to talk amongst themselves, but they were asking the creator for a language to talk to God, so they were given art. So that was probably better, but he's translated it. That was Steiner that said that as a guiding thing, and Eva had translated it into English, but I butchered it now. But that was that same kind of idea of that there is something that when you touch on it within art, you reach for the language of religion. When you hear the music of Bach, which was also then inspired by it, but there is something that's just like, it's so moving, and then it's specifically to mortality, which is almost then easier to go to, because circus is so immediate in the moment. There's no suspension of disbelief. It's not even, it's like you create these real powerful moments where somebody is going to walk across there and they could actually die, and then they did, and they were tempting God and they lived. Yeah, that's awesome. And this is maybe then connected to how I go on about one of the possible roots of what it is that we do comes from shamanism, like how the shaman used to do impossible things. Well, anyway, like they would do healing, and they would do relations to God or to the spirits. So they'd be like for religion, and they would also do art, and they'd do all these things. And at some point those things have been split off as you go along, but that within the art and within all these there is something that ties it together. It's like these most deep and most human things were all embodied in this one character, and along the way the healer has become a doctor, and the artist has become its own art and entertainment, because there's certainly an aspect of entertainment as well in shamanism. And then the religious stuff, and that's these religious things are like, when you look far back, if you see that as one of the places where some of the things we do, juggling, magic, rocks that appear and disappear, that this happened in native cultures in Greenland, and it also happened in Africa in strange things, and in North America where they go like the egg bag. Yeah. Being an example of something that was done with a snake, and that thing exists in a museum in America, where the actual egg bag is like the hair with the mechanics of an egg bag, but that is here it's an empty bag, here's a snake, here is an empty bag again, and that you go, oh, like there you go, like this is actually literally secular magic conjuring woven in with the repertoire of direct communications with spirits or whatever. So maybe we are remembering some of those things too, that these things, just like juggling used to be part of magic, as humanity grew up, the entertainment has been separated out and healing has been separated out, and there is a truth of everything, like the placebo effect that comes through faith healing when somebody is, like Darren Brown did that in the show that he did a few years ago, where he did an actual healing kind of thing. So you go, there is real kind of power in a powerful preacher that does it, but maybe just the 20%, because any drug has, you have to look plus minus 20%, because the placebo effect will make them feel better just because you injected some salt water into them.
Right.
So maybe there is a connection there between the sacred and what we did, and that being the fourth one.
Yeah, you're saying that it's somehow ingrained on our collective subconsciousness.
Maybe
juggling and magic and these things.
Either that, or that just like you're looking for underlying patterns that connects sculpture and juggling, there are underlying patterns of how we relate to the mystery, relate to the big questions, or relate to anyone who ever dares to think a little bit further. Think in a sequence, you'll go, I will die, and now that I'm almost 50, that's become really quite, it's going to happen. Someone I know died, and now it's actually going to happen to me. Like it's like that. Those things comes, and when you do, you start to think of things a little bit differently or whatever. So that these things might be springing from a common kind of source, and I think that source boils down to some of those most human things that separates us from the monkeys and the apes and from the other animals. It's like, because in so many ways we are exactly the same, but there are still that 1% different in the DNA and the development of our consciousness. It is different, just like the consciousness between a dog and a turtle and a snake. It just is different. So maybe they are springing from the same sources, what I say, if they go back to before they got specialized, because everything gets specialized, and in that sense there is something totally the same about juggling and magic. Something absolutely unexpected is happening in, like, a devil stick starts to behave like it looks like magic. It's like devil stick and Diablo both have those, so the devil names connected to them for going like, oh, this, which devil to me also seems like a shorthand for there's some sort of magic going on here. And that juggling and magic and all that, you probably know even the dates when these things started to fully separate.
Well, I mean, it depends on if you're talking about, are we talking about language, when the word juggling no longer is central to what we would today call magic effects, or we're talking about it more in terms of like performance genres, like what would you see a performer mix, for an example?
Yeah. That could be it. It's like going back, I'm going to say probably in the Middle Ages, it was just like from talking to you and talking to Jay, it's like the juggling was very limited. It was just a cascade or whatever for a very long time. They went doing a whole juggling show, so that was just an aspect of what a person you met on the street might do. Well,
what we can say about that is that that's what it appears to us now, but of course we don't know. Maybe they did really intricate 3-ball routines, let's say, but what we can say is that we have no evidence of that, and we don't have any tradition of that. And even as far as film go back, which isn't that far, we can even see then the early routines that they caught on film. There was not much of a sequence to speak about.
Yeah, and that's also really good, because if it's that little then, and then by the time they started to film, and they were then the people who they were filming, like Bobby May or those people who have caught their whole act on film at the early time, they were on the forefront of this art form at that point.
Yeah.
So you would expect them to be if you had all of the experts of that time, it was not like, oh, he's very famous and he didn't do so many variations, but there was these other guys who weren't famous who did the most crazy variations that you would imagine that is not the case.
Right. Usually I say that either juggling was very primitive and it stayed very primitive until about 1900, but it's also possible that juggling kind of was born and died a million times
Yeah.
from that, Egyptian fresco up until,
Yeah.
It's possible. It's just that we don't have any record of it. But,
yeah. And that is the nature of processes that unfold in time.
Yeah.
Like my art is, I've written an essay on my episode about this, so where is my art? Because I have the brochures with pictures of what I did, and I have, the descriptions of somebody who saw it, but it still is not the thing. So it's like in the thing that I have, the experience, or all that I really have, that the exact nature of my art exists in the minds of the combined minds of me and the audience that saw it. Like I have a memory of that event, and they have a memory of when they saw it. And it might only be that now they saw it 5 years ago, and it was a very positive experience. I remember laughing, and then this and that happened, and I might only have a couple of little details that are left of that event in them, even though it was in our time.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. I would like to also talk to you, and I don't know how long we've been going now, but it really should be rounding up. It's been going for 2 hours. That doesn't surprise me. But I heard you talk, and it was kind of odd, because first I thought about it, your transportational, your theory of transportational might be a good place to end it if you got that in you, and now it's happened exactly what happened in your podcast too, where he raises this and you start to talk about it, and there was literally 5 minutes left of the podcast that you guys did it, and I had gone over and made the notes to go. I'd love to, because this also is existentialism. You're trying to go, what's the justification for doing so much exploration into it? What is the value? What is one aspect of value that we can find in the juggling itself? And you have a very...
Yeah, so the argument that I was trying to make there was that in our daily lives, we do a lot of these things that don't have value in their isolation. So for an example, let's say I have a key and I put the key in the lock and I unlock the door, and then I can open the door and go inside. Mm-hmm. And inside, whatever happens there, that was what I wanted to do, right? Yeah. I wanted to get inside. It was cold outside, or I lived there, or whatever it is. So of course that situation, it's in its entirety had value. It was cold outside, I now came inside, it's no longer cold, let's say. But if that isolated activity of just unlocking the door on its own, if you just extract that out from the rest of the situation, it doesn't have any value really. It's just this twist of the wrist with a metal object inserted in a lock, right? It doesn't do anything of value on its own.
Yeah, when your goal, what you want to achieve is to get out of the cold and into the warmth. In that particular sequence, the locking and unlocking of the door is irrelevant to your overall goal.
Right. Yeah. So the argument that I was trying to make is like, okay, so first of all, how much of our lives is this? I call that transportational activities, because they're a transportation towards something that has value. Mm-hmm. I wanted to save myself from the cold, and one thing in the transportation between being in the cold and being inside in the warmth, one of those transportational activities was the unlocking of the door, right?
Yeah, and the other one is the actual walking along, and it's the stopping and waiting for the button, when you push and you're waiting for the crossing, and all of those things are...
Everything, putting the hat on, putting the shoes on in their isolated form, they have little or no value, right? And what I was saying then is that, okay, well, how much of life is stuff like that? And I would say, I haven't done any statistics on this, but I would say that it's a pretty high percentage. Yeah. And let's say it is, 80% of your life is stuff like that. Lifting the...
Yeah, it was like, I love to do shows, but most of my life is getting on airplanes or getting on a bus to the place, and I go out there and then I go there and then I do a 30-minute performance, but that actually took me 26 hours, that whole thing, and I have to go and stay at someone's couch or sleep in a hotel, and all that happens, and then all that was for that half an hour. And if you really put it to a point, then you could say the 25 hours and a half was transportational activities. I fill it with stuff, but it's in an extreme event. So then the percentage would be huge.
Right. So then I was thinking, how much of this involves objects? Well, quite a bit. Like there's a lot of stuff that we do with objects.
Yeah, the keys.
And then I was saying that juggling, if juggling is something like, the manipulation of objects or some kind of handling of objects, that juggling is an exploration of that activity, then that means that I'm in a juggling practice. I am potentially exploring transportational activities using objects. And if I can create some kind of value or meaning in those situations, that would be a huge... That would mean that I create something that actually has value that previously was meaning-less. And we actually have examples of this. I don't know if you've seen like chefs that work in a kitchen and they're chopping up the banana down to a science, or the people who work in the postal office and they throw them. There's a lot of examples of this. I've seen really beautiful videos of people making naan breads, and they throw the doughs, and it's all this whole thing, and they've made that transportational activity into something that's like, it's fun to do, it's pretty for the eye, it has this collaborative aspect, because you and I work together and I throw you the dough, you throw it on the stove, and so
even
forth.
to the fact that people see it and it looks so entertaining that they also want to buy one because I want it made for them. So it has a direct. So now it gets all sorts of value from it being done well or being done with thought.
Yeah, the Turkish ice cream.
Exactly,
salesman.
I was thinking that too. Like they're chopping the thing and they're juggling the thing and they throw it back on the thing, and now I want one of them because I want them to juggle for me, and the end result will be 3 balls of ice cream on a cone.
Yeah, so that's what that argument was about. That it's an exploration in that domain.
An exploration of useless activities, and through some sort of alchemical process of finding value within that, you enrich the actual process itself.
I didn't want to call them useless in that regard.
No, because they aren't useless.
They're
just
not
locking
useless.
the key.
I have to unlock the door. Like, it's very functional, actually. It's just that it's
and you know why you
transportational.
lock the door. Because I was going along with the argument, but it's also like going, well, we lock the door so that when I come home, there's not going to be crazy people living in my apartment and saying it's theirs. It's like I lock or whatever, so that I can't get in and get hot again. So it's part of that. So it's, So it's not that it's not that it's useless, but it's necessary steps along the way to achieving your goals, but not considered to have intrinsic value on their own.
Exactly.
Yeah. So they're only making sense in the value of getting to your final goal.
Yeah.
And by taking those moments out and refining them, adding a conscious decision to develop those moments into something valuable transforms them into having genuine value, and your entire walk now, the way you stop and the way you do, the way you unlock the thing and carry your keys, all of that, then you're gaining more value out of life. Your life has been enriched because of it.
Right. I mean, I'm not unrealistic when I'm not saying that all life should be this long juggling routine where you throw keys and naan breads around, but I was more thinking of it as maybe, let's say I fix 1%.
Yeah.
And I just now made life 1% better.
Yeah. And that's right. Isn't that what is this like? There's one of the meditation apps that's called 3% or something like, or isn't it like 10% or 5%, or like it's that 5% better or whatever, and it's that thing. It's like it's still of value, and that juggling would be that could be a way to explore all this time that is otherwise thought of as transportational. And in a way, it's like then people talking about Zen or whatever, and I can't remember where I read this, but like one aspect of Zen is to be able to see that the way that when you are Zen, if that's a thing, when you are in that mind frame, the way that you swing the dishwashing brush over the washing can become as significant as when you paint a painting. That you go, you're achieving just what you want, and you can so there is something in there where like
sure, maybe you could say it's some kind of a version of Zen, but I specifically meant that juggling could be a knowledge creating activity.
Yeah, not like just research. A value creation, but an actual knowledge creation.
Doing the actual research of it.
Yeah. So you juggle. Well, that's a great way to do it. But in that way, then it's like because the Zen practice is also today. The argument is that this too is an attempt at acquiring knowledge that will transform everyday reality.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Like, it's not just Zen, you sit there and you go, oh, now I got really Zen, that was nice. It's like you practice your whole life to be able to see all of life like that, so that when you go through life, it's like one of those videos where the guy goes down the stairs and he throws the toast into the toaster and he puts the milk and he flicks the bottle and it does all of that, where you just get like, oh, the perfect morning, kind of those kinds of things. And every bit of it became a game. Yeah, which ties back again to me. And
if that's what you wanted, but maybe your pleasure with the key is to just calmly take it out. I don't know.
Yeah. But it's just you can use then. So in that way, a juggling practice can be used to. You're practicing with the idea of learning to recognize all these patterns, so that any transportational activity, seemingly without value in that moment, even though it has a practical use, gets transformed into something of value for you.
Just for the moment.
Yeah. And in that way, we're back to that thing, we're going like, how do you actually create metaphors? And then this would be one way to do it. You undertake the practice of juggling and exploring how to use objects and that way of being in the world now made you 3 or even 6%, your life 6% better.
15.
Yeah, thrown into good measure. Excellent.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that of taking and I love the semantics of making sure that it's not without use, but it is somehow without an intrinsic value in that moment, and turning it into it. Yeah. And using then, because then the juggling practice becomes like the practice of sitting Zen or of doing mindfulness. It's like you're doing an exploration of something, not just to catch the ball under the leg or behind the back, but I am engaging in this practice as an inquiry into how to be in the world. And that resonates deeply with this whole idea of the way of the showman, where you go like, okay, well, if this is what I do, doing shows, etc., how can I find from the symbology and then just the natural what goings on of my life, how can I find a justification for what I do? Because I feel like I live a deep and enriching life, constantly trying to learn and constantly using the lens of what I do to understand things around me, and I find it to be a valuable tool to have all these things. So in that regard, it's like your juggling and my showmanship seem to align with finding patterns that connect in the real world. That will be of value. Anyway, do you have anything you want to add?
I think I'm good. We did quite a chunk of time here.
Yes, we did. Excellent. Thank you very much. Thanks for having the chat and coming down here, and you've been chatting all day now, so.
Thank you.
All right, if you want to find out more about Erik Åberg and his extraordinary work on defining what juggling is, then check out season 1 of Object Episodes, and in season 2 of Object Episodes, which you can find anywhere you get podcasts, you can explore a whole bunch of different really interesting things. Jay Gilligan and Erik Åberg takes up different topics from emails and stuff that they've gotten from different people, in-depth explorations of circus, showmanship, and juggling in particular as an art form. Very, very interesting and inspiring to find out. So, okay, until next time, maybe just buy me a coffee on buy me a coffee slash I don't even know how to say this. It's buymeacoffee.com/Captain Frodo. And last time I said that it existed, and I say it online here, but if you want to find a link for it, just go in the show notes. It's all there. Next week, I'm excited to bring you the first part of my conversation with Mac King. And until then, take care of yourself and those you love. And I hope to see you along the way.